Welcome into the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, episode 95. We're encroaching on that 100 podcast mark. We've been glad to have this back for 2022. If you have not liked and subscribed on the YouTube channel for each of these episodes, or if you have not subscribed and given a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those different places, please do so, because I am your host today, Ronnie Moore, and my co-host, as always, Kyle, Jessie in Birmingham, Alabama. And Kyle, we got a special guest for today's show. We talked in the last episode with Austin Felix, the next to last champion on the Elite Series for 2022. We get to end out the season-long, journey of winners with Bryan Schmitt today, the Mississippi River champion. And really, this guy, he's got a pretty good average on winning. Every 10 events, every 12 events, it seems, with Bassmaster, he ends up winning it. So excited to talk to Bryan today.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like there's definitely those guys that you kind of mentioned there that are super, consistent. And then there's your guys that are consistent winning. They win tournaments. I mean, it's like, some guys go their entire Elite Series career. Obviously, you can name some of the obvious ones, and don't win a tournament. And then, a guy like Bryan Schmitt 2 years in is obviously, won 2 tournaments. So, I mean, that's kind of speaks for itself. I say 2 years in, I guess it's been technically 3.
He just finished his third season.
But 2 years consecutive is what I meant. I misworded that. But no, he's definitely a winner as far as that goes. And you've seen, his wins in the Toyota Series and things of that nature. I mean, dude knows how to win. There's no question about that.
Yeah, he paired together some FLW Tour wins and Opens victories as well. Bryan Schmitt is a winner. Kind of reminds me of Buddy Gross a little bit. Buddy Gross is about, 6 or 7 years into his pro career overall. And Bryan Schmitt's a little longer than that. But, man, to see guys who it's like we talk about the debate. Is it cooler to win an AOY or a classic, or an elite event, or an AOY or a class? Those are 3 and 4 days worth of performances to knock it out. But that's some of the hardest things that we've seen, because guys like Gerald Swindle will go and win Angler of the Year and have never won an Elite Series event. Gerald does have an Opens victory, but we always talk about that guy, as someone who hasn't maybe won one, but there are a lot of really consistent anglers. Bill Lowen, for the longest time, really consistent, but never jumped up there. And then we talk about the varying styles, like a Greg Hackney, somebody who does have up and down events. Or we try to think about being versatile. You want to be good at everything. And yes, Greg Hackney is good at everything, but when he dials in his favorite thing, which is most likely flipping or pitching, if he dials that in, it's a good chance of victory for him. And so there are those guys who have those techniques. And for Bryan Schmitt, it seems like it's not a technique. It seems like it is a style of fishing on a body of water. And that is those places that have current fluctuation, whether it's tidal or it's a river system, and they got to have grass. It is incredible, his track record on places like the Potomac, Champlain, now the Mississippi River. He's won down in Florida. All of those have very similar recipes for the type of body of water they are, which is a hard body of water to conquer for a lot of different anglers.
Yeah, and you and I talked about this after his win. Obviously, we didn't have him on directly afterwards, but I'm looking forward to asking him and talking to him more about that, because it is a very unique situation where, you have your Lee Livesey's that are like dominant on fork. You have your Cliff Prince that's dominant on, you can count on those guys on certain bodies of water, the Johnston brothers on the St. Lawrence River. And like you said, it's really more like a body of water or like a style of fishing. We had Austin Felix on last week, obviously talking about smallmouth fisheries. And there's a lot of guys that do really well in those smallmouth tournaments. Bryan Schmitt's, I guess strength is a hard thing to describe, because it's not just like one style of fishing. It's not just one body of water. It's like, there's like 5 or 6 different things, like you said, tidal, river, submerged grass. It's
both
such
species.
A weird, sure. Yeah. Largemouth, smallmouth, Champlain, once again, with the submerged grass. It's such a weird thing to like categorize, but he's like the one guy that you could put in that category that's just like unbelievably good when all those factors, or even any of those factors, come to light. So, I'm looking forward to talking to him specifically about that, because I'd like to hear his take on, like I said, kind of a difficult thing to describe.
It's kind of like when you think about bodies of water that have grass in them. If you think about, let's just say like Lake Ouachita. You know Lake Ouachita. I know Lake Ouachita. There are some places in there, there's not a blade of grass. It's all trees, standing timber, bushes, rock, whatever. Then there's places where it's a creek and it has grass in it. It's almost like an ecosystem within the ecosystem. You're in this region of the lake that behaves this way, but then the structure is another canopy. I mean, there are highways within that grass underneath that we don't even get to see. We're just imagining what they are. And for guys like Bryan Schmitt, hopefully he gets to paint a picture of what he sees when he visualizes under the water, or, what he's going through when he's picking out places, because it's very, very interesting. Like Seth Feider always said it, at Mille Lacs, he can go to Mille Lacs with very limited practice, no practice, and be able to do well, because boulders don't move. Rocks don't move. They stay in the same place. Unless, of course, we're talking about rocks, that are exposed, like at the Red River, and they do move, but that's beside the point. But boulders, like at Mille Lacs, don't move. So those fish can come there for years and years to the same boulders and get it done. But grass is something that changes all the time. And it's very interesting to see how people adapt to the grass. It's almost like people who live on grass bodies of water. It changes so much year to year, depending on how it grows back, if they've done any maintenance spraying, if they've trimmed it up any, if the winter was later and it's not quite grown up as much. There's a lot of different factors with grass. And I like grass, but I like shoreline grass. I like bank grass. I do not know exactly the intricacies to matted vegetation or hydrilla, eelgrass, things like that. So why don't we just go ahead and bring on Bryan and get him in here to talk to him for a couple minutes about his win, about all of that and more. You got us, Bryan. We got you.
Good to go.
Awesome. Well, Bryan, we were just, we probably set the nicest intro we possibly could have into this interview, because me and Kyle are we're not fangirling it, but we are amazed at the ability that you have on grass fisheries. And so first, we want to congratulate you on your win at the Mississippi River, but we were talking about it. Seth Feider said it, once a long time ago with me, and he said, it's easy to be good at a place like Mille Lacs because rocks don't move. Those rocks stay the same, but grass fisheries, they're ever changing. So we were just complimenting you on places like Toho, the Potomac, Mississippi River, places where the grass is going to change. Champlain, it comes in thicker, it goes out farther, the edges change, and yet you still have such a good track record. That's a lot to take in for the first question of the interview, but why do you feel so comfortable on grass bodies of water, especially if they're tidal or river oriented?
It might be exactly what you said, because they're always changing. It's always finding what's going on now. If it was the same rock or the same stump, it would get old to me. And I think I love it. For one, you got to love that style to do good at it. But I really think I understand it a little bit, and I'm able to understand how grass can really help a fishery, and habitat, the best looking habitat sometimes is, the easiest place to start with it. And I don't know, man. I really would have to think really, really hard to figure out exactly why it happens. I hope it continues to happen, but it's crazy how it keeps working out.
Kyle, I think he's going to have to write a book when he retires from bass fishing about how to fish grass by Bryan Schmitt, #1 bestseller on the New York Times list. That's what Kyle, I think he's going to do.
Yeah, at this point, you'd be hard-pressed to want to give away too much information, because you've got it so dialed in with these certain types of fisheries that it'd be hard to want to give away too much information. But, this kind of just crossed my mind. So obviously, these types of bodies of water that you're so successful in, give me like your #1 body of water that you can't stand going to. It's like, no matter what you do, you just can't dial it in. Like, I'm curious, because you're so good on such a wide range of like styles of fisheries. Like, what is your #1 weakness? Like your one you hate?
I'm really starting to dislike Lake Fork. That thank goodness we're not going there this year. From the outside looking in, it's like, wow, this is such a cool place full of big ones. It doesn't make sense to me. It hasn't I don't know if it's 3 times now I've been there, and I just don't understand. So I try to okay, what's the cover there? Well, they got standing timber. And I start to run with that, and I just don't click there. So I was getting tired of that. It used to be clear water, spotted bass fisheries, but I've become very, very, I'm not saying good with my live scope, but I'm starting to really, really love it. And I kind of like those events. Like if I can lock a Nico in my hand. So that fork, it was getting on my nerves. I'm glad
I've,
done that.
I've been in some college events where it's taken, high weight. It was Shane LeHue beats us by 9 pounds at Lake Norman, which is a huge margin for there. I've been to places where it's like they're catching them, and when you can't seem to catch up, what is that like, knowing that it's going to take over 100 pounds to win, and you might launch your boat on day one, not knowing if you can catch a bass on a place, and that's got to be such a weird feeling of desperation yet hope, because you're a good enough angler that you could stumble upon 20 pounds plus couple days in a row, but that's got to be an uncomfortable feeling, knowing someone's going to catch 100 pounds and I'm not confident it's going to be me.
You're exactly right, and that weighs on me a little bit. And even in practice, when I'm not catching these really, really, really big fish, I'm like, there's something easy here that I'm missing, because it's not that hard. But yes, like you feel like you have to have these huge weights and everything like that. And I don't know, man. I kind of like events that they're big weight events, but I like them on grass fisheries, and everything like that. And I tell you, I'm praying that I get to continue to fish the Elite Series, and I'm praying that we have a classic one time in March on a grass fishery, and I'm involved in that classic. That's my goal. Like, mission number one is to stay qualified and make a classic that's on a grass fishery one day.
So sticking with the theme of grass fishing, let's think for somebody that maybe fished the White River growing up, or somewhere where there's literally no submerged grass to be found. You might go, your whole childhood never fishing submerged grass. What is like the one thing you think people overlook or maybe don't understand about fishing submerged grass?
I think the biggest thing is they get overwhelmed, especially somebody that, like you said, has no experience with it. Oh my goodness, it's everywhere. They're good at something. They're good at, identifying what rock they like. On some of those fisheries that don't have grass, there's all this different kind of rock, and they might choose one style rock. The same thing applies for grass. There's something that they're relating to, and it might not, you can't really see it with your eyes all the time, but once you find it and catch them, it's more numbers, and then you can really start to fall in love with it. It might not be one fish on this rock, you run 20 miles, another fish. It might be 10 big ones sitting on this exact spot in the grass. And once you've experienced that, you're like, man, it exists. I got to keep hunting for it. So that's the biggest thing. They get overwhelmed.
So I'll go ahead and segue that same question, Kyle, into the Mississippi River specifically, because you're the guest on our podcast. We love you, Bryan Schmitt, but we have you on here because you are one of the champions this year from the Elite Series, and you ended the season with a bang. You were outside the classic cut line in the 50s in points, I think 50th to be honest, right there below the classic cut line. You needed a good event. You didn't need to win it, but you went ahead and did so, winning that in and getting Shane LeHue in the classic. He was appreciative of that. But for you, at the Mississippi River, because you got 3 pools in play, all of them have plenty of grass. Even the Stoddard area where you were living in and a lot of anglers were living in, there's still a lot of grass. It's not as easy to navigate around because the water was lower. You got to go take long ways around. You can't go cut through there. So how did you break down an area to find sweet spots within the sweet region? Because it obviously seemed like, a quarter to a third of the elite field found the sweet region in Stoddard, but finding that sweet spot or sweet spots, that's the harder thing to do. And it seemed like you did that right off the get-go with your big day one weight.
So it was a really simple thing. The first morning of practice, I was staying, Cruz got us a house right in Stoddard. I was overlooking
the winning spot.
right there. Like I could keep an eye on it. So long story short, I launched right there first morning of practice, right when we were allowed to get out there. And as I'm idling away, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of grass. I just put the trolling motor down. It was foggy. I had a couple bites quick. Good buddy of mine, Brian New, called me pretty early that morning and said, hey, I've had some bites pretty quick. And there was some fish biting, and it was good. But what I learned really quick in practice, it wasn't like a Potomac style where you could just, meander through this area and get a bite here, get a bite here. They were very spot oriented, and I don't really know why, because it didn't look a lot different, but that played a factor in practice. So once I expanded that area and got bigger and bigger, you would go a long time on the Mississippi River without getting a bite. And then you would get a bite, there would be a couple right there. So I learned there was a reason they were there. And then once I started to really dive into it, I knew that it was voids in the grass, edges, obviously something different that made them be there. And thank goodness it happened so quick. I was able to expand on that for 3 days. I did take a half a day and go up to 7 one morning, and I put it on the trailer at noon. I just felt like I needed 3 days of whatever pool I was going to be in. I needed 3 days, and I knew 8 historically would kick out the wind, and I decided to commit to 8. And the winning spot that I didn't even really lean on until mainly the 4th day. I caught some off throughout the week. I found that I was just running around on this huge flat, and all of a sudden, just a slight depth change and a void in the grass, and it was small. I'm no dummy when it comes to that. There's something different. I turn around, and there they were. I mean, there were a lot of smallmouth sitting there. Didn't think they were big. Didn't think they were winning fish, but had a relief. Like everything else fails, I got a limit here. No matter what, I could take a gamble, try to catch a couple big ones, and I got a limit right here. So that was a big deal.
Another big deal, it seemed like in your practice, was you did spend 3 days in pool 8, but you spent about 2.5 days fishing and about half a day stuck on a sandbar. So were you trying to take a shortcut? Or you trying to get into a hidey hole? Did that eliminate some water? Because you did run aground. What was the deal with that?
So I know how valuable sneaky spots in rivers can be. Okay, so you got low water and you get down in that goose pond deal, and there's all these trenches and cuts, and it can take a long time to figure them out. I don't waste a lot of time doing that. So I learned a long time ago, if you're going to do that, you make sure you do it all. So I'm just trolling along in this narrow little chute, 3-4 foot, and towards the top of it, it just became overgrown with just top vegetation. It was matted across, and I'm trolling through it, and I can't see the bottom. Well, I ran out of water, but just past where I was at, there I could see the ditch. Okay, so I didn't have far to go. Well, I decided to keep on going, and I got stuck on my trolling motor.
Oh,
okay,
no.
But I got so upset, I pulled the trolling motor up and said I got 4 feet to go, and tried to blast through on my big motor and got really stuck. So that was a good little deal. And of course, Brian New was like, yeah, man, tell me where you're at. I'll come right now and get you. Austin was like, oh, geez, where are you at? You're taking away from my practice. But he did come, and they both helped me, and I needed both of them, to be honest with you. And then Austin's like, for me coming and get you here, you got to stay away from Stoddard. And I'm like, no, sir, I'm not.
That's funny.
Did they quote you a ridiculous price to do that? What was the deal with that?
Yeah, something. Austin had some big price, and now he's trying to claim his lower unit is damaged because of it. Brian New's like, all good, whatever I could do. Austin's he's still trying to get something from that.
Well, because he knows now you're worth at least $100,000 more than you were before. And even though he is worth that as much too, I know it goes a long way to, maybe a ring on a finger and a house in his name, at some point.
Oh yeah, it was pretty funny. Whatever, they made fun of me. I don't care. I don't, I got to do out. That was my extent of goose pond though. Once I got through that, I was out.
Nope.
Back on the flats.
I think that's the perfect scenario for laughing all the way to the bank. I think that perfectly describes that situation. Back to the fishing. One thing I was curious about. So I got to spend a lot of time down in Stoddard on the water. I didn't get to cover you specifically. I know Dalton was on you most of the time, but did you catch a lot of fish? And it seemed like a lot of those guys down there were catching a lot of numbers. Like, I mean, it's hard to keep up with the numbers. If that was the case, how did you find ways to catch those bigger than average size fish?
So I don't think I really caught a lot of numbers, man. Like you're saying, some guys were. I just really felt like I had a couple spots that just had better fish and they weren't easy to catch. So day one on the Mississippi River, I caught 1710 on a drop shot and, in grass. So that shows you how finesse you had to get. These fish, the first morning of practice, they wanted to meet you. They were excited. They hadn't been fished for, but by the first day of that tournament, and thank goodness I was willing to change because I really wanted to keep throwing the chatterbait and swim jig. They did not want to do that anymore. And they were still in these places. And I got a really quality bite on that drop shot. And that made me, hey, let's slow down. And the first day, man, I had one piece of grass. I know I caught 3 really big fish off. Like, if you were 2 feet one way, you wouldn't get a bite. And that's how weird it was. But I didn't get a lot of bites. My smallmouth spot had a lot of bites you could get there. But for a big largemouth, no, sir, not a lot.
Tell me about the different types of grass, because you were talking about it earlier when we asked about how you're good at it. And you said other guys can determine what type of rock that they want to fish just by looking. For grass, what characteristics do you like out of each grass? Because you've got hydrilla, you have coontail, milfoil, and eelgrass. And I know eelgrass was kind of, people were wanting to try to get away from it because it had made the duckweed act a little different. The duckweed was still there for the shallow guys that wanted to throw a frog, but it was not as empty underneath. It was just more eelgrass. So it made the frog bite a little weirder. I know it probably made the Carolina rig bite different, but they all filter water so well and get it clearer that when that storm came through and pushed dirty water in a lot of areas, having the right mixture of grass probably kept some areas fishable and others were no longer fishable.
100%. So like you said, you named all 4 of the grasses we had there. I've had good experience with eelgrass before, but to back that up, eelgrass can be a little bit funny. When you're dealing with eelgrass that could be 8 foot tall and 8 foot of water, that's a lot of real estate for them to hide in. And it's not really conducive for flipping. I feel eelgrass is a reaction bait kind of setup. And how hard is that to keep a bait clean in eelgrass? So it can be tough, but thank goodness the one spot I found, it had an edge and it had some rock right outside the eelgrass. So it really helped there. Like, I think they were in the eelgrass, but they would venture out just a little bit right there. Other than that, man, I think you could have flipped in there and not even caught one. But the hydrilla, it seems like hydrilla is always really, really good. I've seen times where coontail is good. So one spot that I caught the big fish off day one, there was one little cast. It was a piece of coontail. It was different. So that's why the fish were sitting there. And I don't know if the coontail is growing on a different bottom. Is it harder? There's always a reason why certain grasses, certain places. For sure, milfoil seems to grow on harder bottom if you see milfoil. And there was some of that on the Mississippi River.
That's why you can see, I guess, some milfoil, close to shell bars. If you do see some on the Tennessee River, especially in the fall when it grows up a little bit bigger. And the eelgrass thing is interesting because we didn't see a lot of reaction baits at the Mississippi River other than maybe topwaters. It went from a Ned rig and a drop shot, which it seemed like a lot of people were doing that on sandy areas where maybe the little bit of current flow that was coming through, earlier in the week, there was a place for them to swing by. But also, once you turned away from those finesse things, it was like a walk-in topwater bait out there over the same stuff. But guys would throw drop shot, Ned rig, Carolina rig, and then topwater. There was like no mid-depth bite for moving baits, like you said. That just disappeared for people.
and that was existent early in practice. And that's the deal. I think something changed there, and thank goodness I found it. I tell you something I have not touched on about this particular tournament. One of the days of practice, I was just down there on the lower end of pool 8, idling through all these areas. You got all these berms and, small little cuts and shallow water, and it takes forever to navigate. And there was one drain, and it's not really marked on any GPS. I got in the middle of all these ponds. They're all to the sides of me, and there's this beautiful ditch that's running through this grass. And in one place, it got to be about 10 foot deep, and it had a nice swing onto a really deep hydrilla edge. And I'm like, you know what? I haven't had a bite forever. I'm going to try this. And I'm thinking smallmouth. Okay, this is a little bit deeper. I'm thinking some smallmouth. So I dragged the Carolina rig. I caught a little largemouth, and I caught one almost 4-pound largemouth. And I was like, why, what's going on there? And I couldn't duplicate that. But that ended up being related to how I won the event. There was some big fish sitting a little bit deeper, largemouth a little bit deeper. We all think they're way up there in the slop, so that one bite on the Carolina rig that I thought was going to be for smallmouth, it showed me a little bit right there. I went to that spot one of the days of the tournament. I actually lost something big there on a swim jig. I could have been a pike. I never got to see it, but I didn't get a bite other than that.
Sticking with the bait theme here, let's talk about that, because I know that, especially with grass fisheries, a lot of times, you've kind of mentioned this already, it's a rotation of baits. It's not necessarily just one thing, unless the guy's just punching the entire tournament. I mean, it's a rotation. So give me your rotation of baits, and then you kind of hit on the Carolina rig there. I know we shot a tackle tip, about that after the tournament. So tell us a little bit about the Carolina rig, and then your entire rotation of baits that you were going through.
So chatterbait, swim jig. I wanted to dead stick a missile bait 48, just like a stick worm style, slow. I wanted to drop shot. I wanted to punch a little bit. I wanted to frog a little bit, and I wanted to Carolina rig a little bit. Going into the event, I thought I was really going to hammer them on the vibrating jig. And that's what I was all in on that. Hey, you have me a classic chance on a grass fishery. I'm going to do this. And they did not want to bite it. So anyway, it evolved to really slowing down. And for me anyway, and I did catch some fish doing all the above, but the drop shot and the Carolina rig became the true players. And it just was, I felt, because of pressure, that not necessarily the weather, it was all about angling pressure. A lot of those fish are being caught, and you just had a few left over. They were still there. They just didn't want to chase anymore. And the Carolina rig started off as, I know they catch them. I watched videos of Seth Fighter on Bassmasters catching them on a Carolina rig, and I'm going to try it as well. And I did catch a couple of largemouth on it. I'm like, wow. So, I locked that in my hand. I was dealing with multiple species on one spot. So I was like, hey, I'll keep throwing this. But pressure was the deal. So the winning area that I won at, I believe there was more places to be found there. Now that you're driving home and you saw that everything that was going on, I'm like, wow, there was a lot of fish down that sector. But that Stoddard area had gotten pummeled.
Bryan, I wanted to ask this question because as an angler, as Kyle and I both, fish, and we are competitive at it. We don't just like to go out and just try to catch a bass. We want to do it to try to develop a pattern, to try to do these different things as if we were in a tournament, even if we're not fishing or practicing for one. So for you guys, do you like it when practice is a little tougher and it gets better during the tournament? Or do you like it when they're biting fast and furious on day 1 and 2 of practice, and you can get bites and figure out stuff, and then you're okay with it getting tougher, as in slowing down? Like, because sometimes I feel like people are like, I like the unknown, and if it gets better, then I'll start getting more and more confidence. But some guys like it where at the beginning of practice, they can kind of, hey, this area has some fish in it. If I have to slow down, I'll slow down. So do you like it one way or the other? Obviously this week it was the fast and then slowed down a lot, but has it seemed like that for a lot of your wins where it's been that way?
Yeah, so fisheries that I'm not really like, I'm not dialed on, I don't spend a lot of time on, I would much rather get a lot of bites early on, get my confidence up, see the glimpse of what could happen. Now, with it being grass, I feel like I could follow them, I can change with them. So on fisheries that I know really well, I'm okay with it being tough with the thought that this is where they're going to be. But fisheries that I don't know real good, I want to get some bites, man. I want to know, this area's really got them. And then I want to learn in the tournament. So like, we're all so scared, we get a couple quality bites. Come on, we got to get out of here. You don't want to be seen, but you really don't want to see anybody else. That's the biggest thing. That's like this gut wrenching thing. When you find something special, you don't want to see somebody else sit down. So you get out of there so quick. And sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. You might have needed to learn a little bit more because look, you got a couple quality bites and you're like, all right, I'll learn what's here in the tournament. Well, there might be a spot within the spot, and when you show up the first day of the tournament, so and so he already knew the spot within the spot, and he's power pulled down right here, catching 25 pounds. You're like, geez, I probably should have spent a little more time because there's not that many here. They're on a spot. So it's a tough deal, man. We all like to get a little bit of confidence going. It's hard to go in there without any kind of confidence. Chickamauga this year, I thought I was going to crack them. I'm going to tell you that right now. I found a spot in the grass that made sense. All these things, the way the water was moving, temperature, and they left me high and dry. And if I would have spent a little more time, I would have learned what was really going on. And all they did, they stopped where I was at one day. They must have just kept going because Brock Mosley caught the fish. They had moved all the way up this back wall. And why more didn't show up where I was at, I don't know. But that was one that, man, I really thought it was going to be a good event. So
that's a season, and that's a season thing. That is a fisher changing into a different, different, I guess, time frame in their year because of the weather changing and it progressing in the spring. Whereas when you get to these summer, the up north events, it's going to be pretty stable. So if there's any condition changes, that's going to be the change, not time of year change. And we seem to do winter, fall, spring, and summer at Chickamauga this year. It was just all over the place.
It was, and that's one I would love to have back, man, because it was right where I wanted it to be. But I don't know. That place is so good, but it's not so good, right? Like it's not full of all these bites. You're not going to get a ton of bites. But man, I pulled into an area. I caught a 7, a 5, and a 6. Okay, in grass, like one cast, one cast, one cast. It's getting ready to be a good derby. They were gone. And I know another angler later on past that tournament, we got to talking. He had the same experience about 150 yards, 200 yards further into me. And they must have just come on in and just kept going. But we didn't adapt. Brock adapted.
So you kind of brought something up there that I find super interesting because I think this happens way more than people talk about it. Like, how often does that happen to you or just in general to anybody where you find something that's really special, something that you think is going to be the deal, and then you show up the first day and there's somebody on it? Because I feel like that happens way more than people like talk about it.
It does. That's the deal, man. I mean, it's so rare that you find something special and you found it to yourself. And it's so rare that it happens. And it's just part of it. We're all so good at electronics and everything like that. And it's such a rare thing. And it's important when that situation happens. Like if you both find it, you got to talk. You got to have a conversation early in that, that morning. Hey, I know you're here first. We obviously was and hopefully it goes cordial. But yeah, it stinks. Nobody else has found, and I found fish that I really thought was going to go good. And there's another guy sitting on them. You get to watch him catch them. So it hurts when it goes the wrong way. Let me tell you.
And then you got to have that conversation, which I think we need to have more of, because I remember having to have that in college. Kyle's had that conversation. You've had that conversation on the Elites probably. I'm making my presence known. I was coming straight to that rock pile. I was coming straight to that grass edge, but I'm boat 80 and you're boat 20. Tomorrow I'm boat 20 and you're boat 80. I'm probably going to be here. So I'm going to let you have this spot on day one, knowing that I expect the same on day two, no matter where we are in the tournament, because I gave you the space. Now, sometimes they'll let you fish. So the next day you got to let them fish, but it's definitely a conversation that needs to happen more, because we see some of these spots that if you did have it to yourself, you can win 100-pound tournament, but you have to split it with people. And that's a deal that goes on every body of water. Every local angler's dealt with that. It's just hard to find really good spots that they're biting at all across the lake. But Bryan, I wanted to ask your thoughts on the Mississippi River. This is your second time winning there. You won in May for an FLW Tour event. I know it's probably much different than it was, in late August, early September timeframe for this event. But one thing I noticed is as we get later into the year, smallmouth begin to factor more. We've been there in June, we've been there in July, and it's been frog and largemouth. We were there when Seth Fighter got second, not Defo won. He started to really dial in smallmouth. Well, we saw plenty of smallmouth and largemouth go back and forth. Like it was a good, not 50-50, but probably 58-42, largemouth to smallmouth. A lot of smallmouth were biting, and you were an angler who had multiple spots that had both species on it. One thing I noticed on Bassmaster Live, it seemed that the smallmouth may look just as long as the largemouth, but they all seemed paper thin. Did you notice certain areas of Stoddard that they were fatter, or maybe they were fatter and the largemouth were skinnier, or was it predominantly the largemouth just weighed more if you got those to bite?
You're exactly right. I mean, that is exactly what was going on. There was a ton of smallmouth to be caught, big frames. They're jumping out there. You're like, man, that's a 3.5 pounder. They were so thin, and you would weigh them, and it's 286, and there was so many smallmouth. I didn't even know smallmouth lived when I won in May. Okay, I didn't even know there was smallmouth. I caught a lot of fish. I might have caught one on accident, but man, there's a lot of them. There is a lot, and I think the right time of year, you could do some work with them if they had some weight on them, because they were long. So I'd never found an area that had heavier smallmouth than another area, but it seemed like I did notice largemouth were heavier in certain areas, and I don't know why that was, but there were some areas they were real thin. So I don't know if you guys remember, Chris had some really nice fish the final day,
fooled us.
and when he brought them up to the scale and Lisa put them on, the frames in there, I'm like, he won. That's why I was such in shock. But Corey and Chris ended up telling me they were really, really thin. He was unfortunate that he caught very thin fish, that they had the frames. But I had some chunkier largemouth. That's that's the deal there. But man, there was a lot of smallmouth. At the right time of year, there's probably a 20-pound bag of smallmouth there. The frames are big. Sure.
That's the one thing, that final weigh-in, it was the most shocking weigh-in of the year, which is always fun, because normally I've watched every minute of Bass Live, and when we end the show, so behind the scenes, when we end the show, we do a wrap up, and it's basically Tommy, Z, and I do a wrap up of who won the event and kind of walking it through. We did Chris Johnston. I looked at him and I said, Zona, you're going to fly out. Tommy, you're going to be at home. Can we just do Bryan Schmitt just in case? Because it's definitely one of those two, but it's too close to call, in my opinion. I don't want to be wrong, because the last time we were there, we thought Porosnik won and Ishman Rowe won. So literally we shot a recap of you just because I bothered them to do it, and then you won. And so I was sitting here thinking, well, why didn't we know he was the winner? What was the deal? And it was because Chris caught smallmouth on top water, which made him seem bigger. And he caught him in a flurry. And it was kind of like, yeah, smallmouth. And then it was like, boom, top water. So the top water blows made him seem bigger. And then it was in a flurry. We're like, dude, he just put 14 to 15 pounds in the boat, but he didn't get those largemouth bites at the end of the day to cull like he had been. So it's very interesting you say that, because I saw you mixing them both. You had mixed bags on stage at times, but it seemed like that final day, because you had more largemouth than smallmouth in your 5 fish limit compared to Chris. That was the pound, or the 2.5 pound difference for you to be able to overtake him, and then win by a couple ounces. But that was just something I wanted to get your thoughts on about the fish sizes, because I kind of noticed that a little bit after the tournament.
Yes, you're exactly right. 100%. There was a lot of fish to be caught on that system. And we all know you got to be on the 3 pound and change kind of deal. You have to have a shot at over 3 pound fish. And, I still can't believe that happened. I made some decisions earlier in the event to keep a fish that I knew was going to pass, but I had the classic on my mind and this target weight that if I got, I would make the classic. And that was a 4 to 8 ounce swing there, because I would have got rid of that fish eventually. But at the time I was too nervous to throw it back. And, I was worried that was going to cost me. And that final day, I told the guy that was with me, my camera guy, said, man, we're going to be light a little bit. Okay. Cause we were right there on every weight, going into that final day. And Chris was light, on his bass track every day. I said, I don't care. We have 8 pounds. Just let's be a little bit light. So I knew I had 16, 16:10 to 16:13. I knew I had that. And I'm like, I get back and I'm like, Chris is showing 14 some. I'm like, he won because he's got 15 or 16 pounds. And then Corey came up to me and was like, what do you really have? And I told him. He's like, man, Chris only has like what it says. I'm like, stop, Corey, stop. I don't want to hear
Don't get my hopes up. Yeah.
Don't get my hopes up. He's like, I don't know, man. It's going to be close. And then I talked to Chris for a quick second, and he hinted that it was going to be close. So then you start to get really, really nervous, because when I looked at Bass Track, once I checked in, I'm like, I did all I could do. Chris has got.
I cut his lead big time, but I just didn't get over the hump. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
I don't get the opportunity to do this a whole lot, but I had to go back to August 29th, that Monday where you won, to find these messages, because Ronnie's trying to take a little too much credit here.
Oh no, Ronnie
no.
No.
We're going to talk about this real quick, Brian. You can have some words with him. He said he asked if I would get a tackle tip with you and Chris Johnston both. And he said, Johnston, I want a tackle tip Tuesday about how he won the week. That was at 4:15 p.m. Before you weighed in, I said, what if he doesn't? Ronnie's message back said he should, but if Schmitt wins, get one with him winning. And I texted him back. I mean, literally, as soon as
next person to weigh in,
said he didn't win. And Ronnie's text exactly says, holy Schmitt. All caps. So I just had to throw that out there, because when he said that, I was like, wait a minute. I'm pretty sure Ronnie was under the impression that he wasn't going to pull it off either. So.
Well, I didn't think he would win, but that's why I said, like, it's going to be a pound. And so I was like, while we're all here, why don't we shoot this recap? Because I'd rather delete the clip than not have the clip. And so, I'll do a 50-50. I thought he had a shot. I didn't think that he actually got it done. So that's my fault. And I didn't think that Chris was going to finish second twice in a row. Oh my gosh.
I tell you a funny story. Okay. I'm going to just share this story. So I've known Corey and Chris a long time, and Corey has finished second to me a couple times on the Potomac in Toyota. And this dates back a long time. So me and Chris are in weigh-in line, right before we weigh in day 3. And we're doing the math, and he's going to have a couple pound lead. I'm going to be in third. And Chris is like, man, I hope I can finish this one off. I've been close lately. I would like to finish this one off. And I just simply said, I said, Chris, I hope you do good. I said, but usually if I'm in this situation, I try to finish it out. And I could tell that sat in on him a little bit. Okay. I'm just going to say that, I didn't mean anything by it, because we all like each other. We tease
It's a
each
little
other.
Dale Earnhardt there, the intimidator. I like it.
Little bit. And it worked out, man. I don't.
That is something that I wanted to talk about real quick. I talked to Kyle about this on the podcast, and I've talked to some other people about it, but there are very few people in the world that have won as many semi-pro and pro tournaments in the sport of bass fishing as you. And I said, at what point, this was an underrated, perfectly rated, or overrated question. Like, how do we know an angler is overrated? How do we know they're underrated? And I was like, Brandon Lester and Bryan Schmitt are two of the most underrated anglers in the world, because Brandon finally broke through and showed his potential this year of his ceiling. He can definitely get wins. And what is it? Correct me if I'm wrong. The trophies in your cabinet, but I think you've got 2 elite wins now, elite wins. You have an open victory. You have like 10 Toyota wins. And I think you have 1 or 2 FLW Tour wins. So you've got like 15 to 16 semi-pro, like $50,000 or bigger victories. That there are like a couple people, and they're like Van Dam and Rick Clunn. Like, it's not many people that have more first place finishes at this level and higher. Have you thought about that before?
Ronnie, I have, and I appreciate you touching on that. It's special to me. And I don't even know how to explain it, man. It's happened, and it's something that I don't take for granted, and I don't want to ever say, that it's going to happen again type thing, but man, it's been so special that I've accomplished all that. And I just want to continue where I'm at now, Ronnie. I just want to keep my position and be able to keep having opportunities to fish the Elite Series and try to win. And that's where I'm at. I don't want to change anything. What position I was in on points. I don't want to change anything I'm doing. I'm scared if I change, I'll lose that winning side. I don't want to fish for points. I want to fish for wins. And if the win's not happening, maybe one day I'll be able to back up and punt, but I still don't. And I've been doing it long enough. But man, yeah, I don't know, Ronnie. It's crazy. And I don't know. It's hopefully it could keep going a little bit, but I feel very solidified and humbled what I've done, man.
Yeah, because I talked to Kyle about it, and it's cool if we know this, the diehards, the people who look at all the numbers, you probably appreciate that we recognize that, but there's got to be a certain point. Your personality and Austin Felix's personality, you guys aren't one to brag about it, but we asked him on last week's podcast, does he feel like he's in the, I made a graphic that was the smallmouth Mount Rushmore, 6 or 7 guys who were just money on smallmouth bodies of water. And I put Felix on there, and I asked Felix, expecting a humble response. I said, do you think you belong? And he said, oh, most definitely. I think I belong on that. I think I could do it. And I was like, I love that, because that is the way as a competitor, when you're with your buddies, it's, dude, I'm a winner. And I know that in 2020, 2021, for half the season, you were like, what, did I make the right decision in my life qualifying for the elites and coming over here? Because it wasn't an easy 2020 for you. You got some unfortunate things that, nullified points for the day. And it is kind of a scary thing, even for a guy with millions in earnings, to worry about requalifying for the elites. And you mentioned that in your speech at the Mississippi River, that if you want to do this, it's not easy. What's that been like in your mind as a guy who wins a lot and a guy who has a great reputation, needing the last 3 events of the season that you've performed in, but you needed those? That's weird. And I am shocked by it. As somebody who picked you in 2020 a couple times in fantasy, I was like, is this a different guy dressed up as Bryan Schmitt? Because this is not the guy I thought we were going to have. And now the last 2 years I've been like, oh, there he is.
Ronnie, and I know you picked me, buddy, and I appreciate that.
You got stuck at Santee. I'm sorry, I can't help that.
it bothers me deeply that, I'm telling you, I might sound like, oh, shucks, I don't care. it bothers me deeply. I'm like, I'm better than this. I'm better than this. I don't need to win, but I'm better than what's happening. And that's what's so crazy about this sport. Man, you can win a tournament. You're the best, you're the king. The next week, you feel like, what the heck is going on here? Like, so, I don't know. Some guys like Palaniuk and some, they just always figure it out. But like we talked about, man, I'm scared to change anything, Ronnie, because I don't want to lose that knack for winning. But it is a humbling deal. This is 2 seasons in a row that we get in the last part of the year, and I need to pull something out of my, to keep my career. I'm praying that I can just keep it going, get some good momentum, get through this next year, and get to my 5th year and get rid of that first year and maybe a little bit of weights off my shoulders. But new and a couple guys are telling me, dude, you need to just fish every tournament like your life depends on it, and you might do better. It's like when it gets down to the last couple of events, it's like something just happens. I think it's the course, it's the fishery that happens. But it burns me up, man. I just want to get that past me, get that first year past me, and show what I really can do. And I've been doing it long enough. I had one really good season on points in FLW before. I just didn't have the bombs. I had my decent finishes, just didn't have the bombs. I had 3 bombs this year. I had 3 top 10s, but I had 3 disasters. And the worst one was fork because I was going to catch them offshore. I was going to catch these fish. I had them found. There was an easy bag on the bank, and I never even checked it. The second day of the tournament, everything was out the window. I just went through a buzzbait on the bank. It was easy. And I'm like, this was stupid.
I figured out Lake Fork.
Like, out Lake Fork. Not really, but there was a check. There was a 40 on the bank with no practice if you just did it for 2 days. And I've been doing it too long to have a preconceived notion. I knew I was going to catch them offshore before I got there. That was a mistake. We're going to get back to what we used to do. Just show up, let the fishery tell us. I'm not rigging up any rods. I'm not doing anything till I hit the water, and we'll see what happens.
Well, Kyle, we're going to let Bryan Schmitt go here, but I love this Bryan Schmitt more than the Bryan Schmitt that I first met way back in 2016 when I asked him, hey, where are you going on the final day at Champlain so I can come take photos of you? And he's like, I'm not telling you, buddy, you're just going to have to find me out there. And I was like, I don't like this guy at all. And then he ends up being on the elites, and I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to know Bryan. And now I understand why he had to keep his Champlain secrets to his chest, because it is a money maker, guaranteed top 10 every time we show up there. So I know he's looking forward to that one on the elite schedule next year. We got a Seminole, we got an Okeechobee. We've got some other places like that coming up for grass fisheries, and we should keep an eye on Bryan Schmitt. But Kyle, do you have anything else for Bryan? Otherwise, we'll let him go, a 2-time champion on the Elite Series now.
The last thing I was going to say, and I'll make this really quick, I think that it almost seemed like Bryan was getting down on himself there for a second. I think the one thing you have to keep in perspective too, there's a lot, and I mean a lot of guys that wish they had the killer instinct that you do. I mean, there's something to be said for that, because let's just be honest. There's way more guys out there that get there and fall down than get there and stay there like you do. So I think that, that deserves a lot of credit. And like I said, that's not something that everybody has. So I'm not trying to be a word of encourager or anything of that nature, but I think that that's something that's really special.
I appreciate that, man. Seriously, I do.
It's like I think an old football coach, I'm probably terrible for not remembering this quote, but he just says, what alleviates all the stresses in the world? Just win, baby. I mean, just win. So talking to one of the most winningest anglers in professional fishing, Bryan, I appreciate you joining us. Thanks for giving us the lowdown on the Mississippi River, kind of the inside of your mind on grass fisheries, and then also some of the struggles of, winning, but also underperforming at times for what your standards are. So Kyle, Bryan, I appreciate y'all. And for the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, episode 95, that's a wrap. What a great talk with Bryan Schmitt, Mississippi River champion.
Thank you, guys.